Morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2, I guess, Tuesday. And our panel is called Innovators on the Front Line of the Future. Let me take a moment. My name is Peter Diamandis. I serve as Chairman and CEO of the Xprize and Executive Chairman of Singularity University. And I'm here with a great panel who are just off of 2 events. Paul and Freda and myself and a number of you here in the audience are just off of the Xprize Visioneering 3-day event in which we sort of set a set of goals for the Xprize. Where are the world's biggest problems? Where should we be launching Xprizes? And we undergo a series of discussions and debates. And I'll come back and speak for a minute about what Visioneering was this year and the 8 subjects that we were focusing on after my panelists introduced themselves. And we're also off of an event that Megan was at, which is run by Dean Kamen, the first robotics competition. And I promised never, ever, 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 ever again will I have the 2 compete in time and space. That's a losing proposition. So let's actually allow our panelists to introduce themselves. Megan, we'll start with you, if we would.
Sure. I'm Megan Smith. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been in Google almost 10 years, led early stage biz dev, and did things like acquisitions of Google Earth and Maps and Picasa spreadsheets. These days I've moved to Google X, which is kind of a moonshots lab that Sergey started, working on several projects. 2 of the public ones are the self-driving car, try to see if we can make a difference on all the time we're wasting, the fuel and safety with cars to drive themselves. And projects like Google Glass, which is this is a Bluetooth headset to bring the internet to you, and a bunch of other projects like that. And also Peter collaborates with us on a project called Solve4X, solve4x.com, which is a moonshot thinking website and experience. We're trying to get more people to make proposals for how to make great change in the world with tech moonshots. And we work with Xprize and MIT Tech Review and others. Prior to that, I ran an internet company called Planet Out. I'm a graduate of MIT in mechanical engineering, was in the media lab, and I'm on their board now and just love getting good stuff started. And Peter, you talk about abundance. I often talk about sustainable abundance. We really are kind of card-carrying optimists about how we can make change in the world with tech innovation.
To my left, Freda Lewis-Hall, Chief Medical Officer. Freda, would you introduce yourself properly?
Yep, yeah. Well, I thought that was quite proper.
No,
Thank you,
no,
though.
no.
So I'm Freda Lewis-Hall. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Pfizer. I, too, have an interesting, I think, history. I'm a psychiatrist by background and training and practiced for a while on the front lines in a number of places, and then moved into research and ultimately ended up in the pharmaceutical industry, well, let's just say for a good little while. And have been involved in everything from drug development to establishing new opportunities to look at gender-based biological differences, ethnopsychopharmacology, and am now the Chief Medical Officer. And my job in a word, or in a sentence, I guess, is the safe, effective, and appropriate use of our medicines from the first time any one of them touches a person in clinical trials to the last time any person anywhere in the world touches one of our medicines. That's what I do.
Thank you, Freda. And you're an amazing person. 2 amazing women. And on this side, the men.
Less amazing.
Well, not as amazing as the women.
Amazing.
Paul Benda with Homeland Security, which is always gets everybody sort of like. Yeah.
Right.
Paul, introduce yourself if you would.
So I'm Paul Benda. I'm the director of the Homeland Security Advanced Research Projects Agency. So I like to describe it as DARPA's little brother. And I'm jealous of DARPA, not just because their budget's bigger than mine, but they can say DARPA, and I have to say Homeland Security Advanced Research Projects Agency. So HSARPA. And so my job really is to transform government, state, local, and federal government with technologies.
Keon, we have a seat right up here, by the way.
And how do we do that? How can we change to make government more efficient? How can we bring in breakthrough innovative technologies, but at the same time recognizing the environment that we operate in, which is really fiscally constrained? And so, anyone who's worked with federal government understands that the Hill is asking, what have you done for me lately? That we really don't have the headspace to take these long moonshots. And so how can I, recognizing the importance of that, how can I partner with people like Peter and the Xprize and others to leverage the work that they do to think big, while I really focus my efforts on transitioning those technologies into operational use? So, and it goes from the starstruck to the mundane. We're working on programs such as a superconducting cable that's cryogenically cooled to link substations together to provide electric grid resilience, to how do I screen you faster at an airport?
Yay.
And we do think within 3 years, we'll have a prototype machine that will give you the tunnel of truth. You put your bag on a belt, you walk through, you meet your bag on the other end, no divestiture. So that is actually underway. You might have heard other people talk about mimetic materials. Those kinds of things are enabling that. And so those are the kind of things that we do. We span the globe from, or span the technologies from Border Patrol agents who drive vehicles and drag tires behind them to smooth out the sand so they can see footprints in the sand, to advanced materials to allow us to detect explosives in real time. And so our job is really how can I leverage the private sector, industry, and innovators, which is part of the reason we're at Visioneering, to reduce the risk to the government, quite frankly, and then be able to pluck the best and brightest ideas and then fund those into full transition into operational use in your homeland environment today.
Thank you, Paul. First of all, if you could raise your hand, who is here at Visioneering that's in the audience? If you could raise your hand up. So we have 2, 4, 5 individuals here. So Visioneering, Xprize Foundation as sort of the big concept is we identify places where a breakthrough should exist, right? We should be able to fly people into space. We should have 100-mile-per-gallon cars. We should be able to have a tricorder device. And those conversations take place in sort of a big what if, like where there are market failures and where are technologies converging, like you should be able to create a new product, a service, a market, something like that. And it's an interesting conversation that takes place. It doesn't take place enough places. And so what we ultimately do is we pick subjects every year. We invite our benefactors and experts from around the world. We have about 120 people. Jordan Brown over here runs Visioneering. If you want to get in, he's the guy to know. That way you get everybody asking you, not me. And we have an amazing conversation. So the 8 subjects we picked this year are women and girls. We picked security, happiness, which we haven't ever done before, infrastructure, mobility, help me out here. Behavior.
Aging.
Aging, and one more.
Network.
Happiness.
Infrastructure, network.
Infrastructure.
I said infrastructure, mobility, happiness, women and girls, security,
Behavior.
aging. There's one more. I did? Okay, if I got them all. Anyway, and we have a conversation takes place, and then the people come together and they form teams, and they come up with prizes in those areas. And then they compete them. People are literally viciously like pitching their prizes to each other, and there's a voting process. We go from 24 prizes down to 10, down to 5, down to a winner. And in years past, we had what became the Tricorder Xprize, that Qualcomm and Nokia funded 2 parts of it, and that got launched. Last year, a learning education prize won the competition, and that's become our Global Literacy Xprize, and that's mostly funded right now. We're still looking for some support, but we hope to launch that this year, and I'll tell you what the prize is that came out of it this year. And what I'd like to do is actually run through the top 10 prizes that we did at Visioneering and ask the group here to comment, add content, and I think, Megan, a lot of these are going to be areas that you're authentically involved with and would be able to comment. So can we get these slides up? Drum roll, please. So the Tony Robbins, and then the naming of these prizes are sort of like for fun, right? Tony was one of the people presenting a behavior. So the Tony Robbins Happiness Xprize was really around how do you actually start to try and, we've talked about can you prize a happiness competition, actually change people's behavior. Do you remember any of you guys on this team here on Happiness Xprize? So anyway, the notion here was really trying to drive happiness. I'm going to skip this one, go to the next one.
Let me add. Yeah.
Oh, please.
Because this was an exciting one.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
I just had a quick, there's a guy from Johns Hopkins, Marty Seligman, is that right? Who did some really interesting measuring around happiness of like sort of 80 different factors or words and measured to the zip code level. Looking at happiness measured as not only sort of economic, family, personal, like a whole range, and of course, more thinking about that, but helping people understand sort of the ecosystem of happiness for a person, which has many different factors to it. And I think that often, we think, I'm an engineer, we think so, I'm a mechanical engineer, mechanically, or so linear about things. And happiness as a fundamental thing. For example, I think we would have a lot less violence in our schools if we actually thought about what is happiness, how are we helping kids collaborate well, appreciate each other, etc. So I love that this was one of the topics.
Yeah, I was there with this as well, and one of the striking things as a first-time Visioneering attendee was the idea that Visioneering is really all about asking the right questions. And I carry around a very aged little piece of paper in my wallet that says, it's not that they can't identify the solutions, it's that they can't identify the problems. And so Visioneering really is the exercise of helping to identify the problems. And this one I thought was particularly interesting because happiness feels nebulous and maybe not prizable, squishy. And this prize really was underscored with some data around the fact that there's a belief that happiness is actually a learned behavior or can be a learned behavior. And in addition to teaching all the other things that we teach, why not teach happiness as a proactive, prospective part of a curriculum? And this was the notion of testing that.
And part of that is resilience. Marty Seligman was working with the DoD on resilience, so if you can help people with this, very important. In the 3rd grade in our kids' school, the teacher has, in effort, there's joy. And one of her goals is to make sure the kids feel that. And so I think that it's a big thing and an important thing to learn, and it's part of sort of this broad set of what is happiness. It's just not panacea of ha la la la, but it's this broad set of what does happiness mean, and it's contributing, being recognized, etc.
And ultimately, if that's the end goal of one of the major goals of life, well, why not try and incentivize that?
Pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one. Meteor of the Mind. So these are not in obviously reducing order. They're in a random order. This actually ended up winning. We had sort of 2 top prizes, one that was a slam dunk and one that actually won the competitive competition. And this won the competitive competition, and it's actually the notion of doing an Xprize around Alzheimer's. And we've actually raised about $500,000 from a series of private donors and us against Alzheimer's. We haven't announced it yet, but to design an Alzheimer's Xprize. And you guys know the stats. Half of everybody over the age of 85 comes down with Alzheimer's. If you don't die from heart disease or cancer, Alzheimer's will get you, and then it gets worse from there. And so it's one of our priority Xprizes. Other comments on?
No, this was also a very exciting one that likely will kind of evolve in its specificity, but the data is compelling. And usually what I do when I talk about Alzheimer's is to say at the age of 85, which is the expected age for us to live in this generation, this half of the room will get Alzheimer's.
Sorry, guys.
This half of the room will be taking care of them. So there will be 100% impact on the entirety of the world with the aging process of Alzheimer's on all of us. So this is actually one of the 2 things that if we don't bring it to its knees will bring us to ours. The other one, of course, is obesity.
And we need really creative innovation here. One of the things that's interesting along those lines, Dr. Keith Black gave a talk at SelfRx where he sort of said, all of us are destined for this, but the question is who's at what, slope rate. You sort of think across age and sort of as your mind is deteriorating, can we change the slope of the curve for for everybody, so that it comes after someone would be no longer be alive. And what I think we need, especially here, what he was noting, he had some breakthroughs around looking into the retina very early on and detecting the beginnings of Alzheimer's. And so what are the lightweight tests that we could do on everyone to figure out who has those steeper slopes so that we can help them, live, not have this come into their life before they're not alive.
So we're in the middle of design here. One of the things that we were lucky to have done at Xprize is we've actually collected blood samples and created cell lines from 135 people who are over the age of 100. They're centenarians, and they're disease-free from any kind of dementia. So I don't know if you knew this. We have 135 cell lines for dementia-free, average age 105. And we're actually going to be, what we're looking at right now is sequencing those and creating stem cell lines from those and actually providing them to teams to try and determine what is the genomics and the proteomics of healthy brain aging over, because we're all headed towards a population of centenarians.
Right.
Let's go to our next one.
Oh, I just want to say,
yes.
I was on that winning team.
Oh, you were on the winning team.
I just want to make sure, since it was such a competitive environment, that you knew that I was on the winning
two
team.
winning teams?
No, I was on.
Okay.
Oh, come on now.
Oh,
You
well,
just
no, I just
up the bar that fast.
I just saw you up there a lot. I just thank you for
I was on that one.
the network Xprize. So, just very quick. Were any of you guys on this team? You're going to speak about this, but one of our young participants, Costa, was asking the question of how do you get network connectivity around the world. So he was teamed with Vint Cerf on one side and Scott Hassan on the other. And his question was really, how do you provide the other, 2 or 3 billion people with cheap megabit, dollar per day connectivity? And Megan, would you speak about the importance of this?
Well, I think we have an image or two that I thought would be really illustrative for people.
Let's go to the next slide, yeah.
Okay, so this is one of our engineers did this great thing. He hooked up our data centers to this great visualization so you could see Google search. But think of it as internet. So in the red is people searching in English, Spanish, and in sort of a yellowish green and then green. And so you just see wherever people are and where there's connectivity and electricity, people are online with each other. And what matters here,
the height represents?
The height is the volume of searching. And so you just see people are really collaborating. And so I always think of the network as two things, the plumbing layer of the network and the conversation. Why do we gather here together? And then we connect and we exchange cards so that we can be connected virtually afterwards. So you can see the world is connected and in conversation, and entrepreneurs can work. The second slide is really striking. So this shows you that the network available, in this case to people in Africa, 900 million talented people in Africa are not in the global conversation digitally. So if you live in these places and you have ideas and talent, you have really two choices. One is I work for a multinational or a government who has access, or leave, and become a diaspora member. So the good news is this is a little bit older of a slide, and this is starting to change. And I also want to point out it's not time of day. I mean, look at Europe. So the different languages and the conversation going on. This is really a failure of the network layer for this talent. So I just think, all innovation in the world comes from entrepreneurs, be they social, political, economic entrepreneurs. And we could really solve poverty issues and many other issues if this talent was in collaboration with us. So I just think a network prize is really important. I don't know if there's one more slide here. Yeah, this is a striking thing. It sort of speaks to a different Xprize that we're going to get to in a second, but this is a project that Nicholas Negroponte is doing together with Dr. Marianne Wolf from Tufts right there. It's a sort of an extension of the One Laptop Per Child. It's a tablet project. The children you're seeing are in Ethiopia. No one near them knows how to read. They don't know how to read. So about 9 months ago, they dropped off the tablets, and no one is intervening. Just handed them to the kids, taught one adult how to charge them with solar so that wasn't the gating factor. And the question that Marianne and Nicholas have is, can the kids teach themselves to read using these tablets? And so they've piled them up with all the apps that all our kids, and we try to convince them to use versus Angry Birds, maybe just more of the learning apps. And the kids are using, I think it's 50 apps on average about after the first week. They've already hacked into Android and taken the camera back. And Marianne feels like it's the moment in Helen Keller's life when, right now she was just there, when Helen figures out that the writing is related to that. They're about to read. So the reason why this project is interesting for many reasons is there's about a 50 or 100 million children who do not have a teacher, and they will not have a teacher. And so how are we going to help the children in the worst poverty situations join us in the conversation? I added this second picture here of these fabulous young kids who won the Google Science Fair last year. Brittany in the middle doing breast cancer research from Florida, huge breakthroughs. The two guys on her right and left are from Swaziland. And so I just feel like these laptop kids, I hope, at some point, together with not only getting educated basically, but actually getting on the network, will become these other kids and will win science fairs and change their own world. So.
I'll use this slide to mention what we're doing with global literacy. So our top priority this year is to launch a global literacy Xprize. Nicholas Negroponte is the chairman of that prize. Sir Ken Robinson and also Gordon Brown are sort of the vice chairs of those prizes. And our goal is it'll be a $15 million purse, and it's going to be for teams to develop the software that can be deployed on tablets that would effectively gamify, incentivize, and allow kids to teach themselves to go from complete illiteracy to what we're defining as or what's defined as a stage 3 English literacy within 2 years. Without schools, without teachers, without anything other than the ability to recharge the tablet. So we're basically the small experiment that Nicholas did, we're going to roll out, and it's going to be, teams will have 200 kids, probably 100 in sub-Saharan Africa and 100 in the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, someplace. There'd be gender-balanced populations, and the software approach that actually allows them to learn to read the fastest and most complete will win. So it's meant to be sort of a wave of literacy that will come after this. So that's we launched global health last year. Our big idea is global literacy this year. Next, please. Antibody Express Xprize. You want to talk about this one?
Sure. So I think, one of the things that we see focus on security, but not just security, but global climate change is the rise of foreign animal diseases, zoonotic diseases, the rise of different diseases across the U.S. And as they grow, the question becomes is how are we going to defend ourselves against that, both from a public health perspective. You can see the new strains coming out of Mexico and coming out of China that are worrisome today, as well as you look at H1N1. You look at all those different things. And so the question was really, can we fundamentally change and innovate on the way we develop vaccines? Right now it takes years for a vaccine to come to market. And Freda, you know this much better than I do.
Absolutely.
And so is there, can we take the blinders off? Can we try and open this up to folks that might think completely out of the box and come up with a way that can put together a vaccine? I think they had their metrics within, within 1 month of pathogen isolation. So you could see where this could potentially, if we could get to this point, stem the flow of pandemics. If any of you have ever seen Contagion, how quickly or how long it took for that vaccine to come to fruition so that we could actually protect the population.
Freda, do you want to add?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. First of all, the technology around vaccine development is really accelerating, and we may well be able to get not only quick responses, but out in front of the mutations in various contagions before they've even mutated to that point. So the scientific platform for this is going to be fascinating. But Megan's point about connectivity is going to be absolutely critical because without the full force connectivity and collaboration, by the time you actually know there's a kind of under the waterline impact that's occurred before it comes to our attention, and that often is the life-threatening period. So there's some real excitement about putting together the advancing technology in this space with the networks in this space to help us identify the need sooner, and then to bring the collaborators together in a more profound and non-serendipitous way. I don't know if that's a word, but in a more intentional way.
At Singularity University, when we talk about this sort of stuff, we talk about the idea of isolating the pathogen, sequencing it very quickly, creating the vaccine, and then being able at the speed of light to distribute the information about the vaccine so they're made locally in cities, so that you actually, it's a immediate antivirus response that's transmitted at the speed of light, while the pathogen itself can only go at the speed of an airplane.
Well, and this is one area, when we talk about revolutionary technologies, 3D printing. Can we actually revolutionize 3D printing to 3D biologic printing, where you could then just distribute the bits, have the printing cells, they may actually print or produce the vaccine locally? I mean, those are the kind of revolutionary changes, hopefully we'll see.
Yeah. And on the network side, several years ago, Jeremy Ginsburg, great Google engineer, came up with an idea to look in the search results for, he called it flu trends, to see as people felt unwell, were they searching for certain kinds of words that you could see the emergence of flu. And it turned out that we were 80 to 90% accurate at the city level of the emergence of flu in a region. And so we worked with the CDC and to get sort of the ground truth and map the data, and do that with many different equivalent ministries of health around the world. Not every disease can be like that, but in a lot of cases there's signals you can catch from our global network, in this case trending off search, or perhaps we're using Ushahidi, amazing social platform for communication on crisis, or Facebook or other, Twitter, things that we'll be able to use not only to catch and see signals, but also then as part of the system to alert everyone and have everybody act to protect themselves together with the medical community.
Great. Next slide, please. Rainmaker Xprize. Any of you guys on this team? Anyone want to talk about this one? So this came from Eric Hirschberg, CEO of Activision, presented this one. He actually won prize last year, and he made it in to the top 5 this year, so he was gunning for it. This was the idea of one of the biggest issues on the planet is lack of clean drinking water, and there are different approaches like Dean Kamen's slingshot, which is a phenomenal technology. This team was looking at, can you in fact create the technology to extract huge amounts of water from the atmosphere, which effectively democratizes the distribution of water around the world and is a cleansing process itself, right? The whole process of water entering the atmosphere removes most of the particulates, and so that was this concept, and I don't have much else to add to it.
Well, the only thing I would add is I don't really want to pitch against Eric Hirschberg again because the guy goes up on stage, he's the showman extraordinaire. But I think this was one of those things where for me, my first Visioneering was seeing people approach problems from a completely different perspective and recognizing not being constrained by boundaries. We all look at water as desalinization, a very power-intensive, cost-intensive industry. But the idea was you've got this purified water that exists in the atmosphere. Can you pull that down? And then having someone great that can tie all those things together and pitch it. He did. Came in what, second place? Or
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Next, please. Game changer Xprize. So this was being presented by Frank Sullivan, who's the CEO of RPM, one of the largest paints and coatings manufacturers. He's also one of the people underwriting our early work in learning and global literacy. So this was around gamifying education in elementary schools. Develop an infectious and gamified learning environmental learning platform to unleash creativity and passion. And it was a two-part prize for $5 million for developing the software, and then $5 million for rapid adaption in elementary schools. So, I mean, a huge subject we're all passionate about. Megan, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I was just say, I was lucky to be at the first Robotics Nationals, which is, if you get a chance to go to this, it's astonishing. It's K through 12. 4 levels. The little kids are doing demonstrations with Legos. The theme for the younger kids was about seniors, and they had interviewed seniors in their community.
Seniors meaning elder, not senior high school.
Yeah, elders. So they had interviewed, and they had to find out about what technology was like when they were younger and what time, compare that, and they had to build Lego things about that, as well as think about and innovate and design technologies that would help the seniors, lift things, carry things. It was wonderful to see these little kids doing their thing. The next group is called First Lego League. It's mostly the 4th through 6th graders, 4th through 8th officially. It's programmable robotic Legos. And one of the things since we had women and girls as one of the themes related to games, Dean told me that when that particular competition started many years ago, it was like 99% boys. And he was trying to figure out what's going on. And the game design was you get this robot with the Mindstorms type Lego controllers, and then you were scoring points for all kinds of activities on the board. But 2 years into it, they decided to have a theme like the seniors. In the case of the seniors design this year, the kids were doing all kinds of activities. They had to choose the right color pill to help the senior find that, help them reach, all kinds of stuff on the board, different points you could. As soon as they introduced a theme that had some impact on the world, the group shifted to 60% girls. So what they found was girls were very happy to design robotics if they had a purpose. The boys were more interested in the robotics for this cool game and to score the points. And that together, if the purpose had points, you could get them all in the room. And so I think, as the game designers work, they need to be paying a lot of attention to what everyone in the classroom would like to cause to happen in the world or be motivated by, and make sure the game design is taking to that. The third group is called First Tech Challenge, which is a small robotics contest for like a middle school. And then the senior group is amazing. Each group builds a robot. I think there were 50,000 schools this year, 73 regionals. The Edward Jones Dome in St. Louis was full, 20,000 kids. Imagine Friday Night Lights, pounding music, but it's kids jumping around because they're doing STEM robots.
What was the game this year?
It was a frisbee throwing thing. The playing field was about the size of where everybody is right here. 3 slots to get frisbees into various point levels, and over here, and then a tower, a blue and red tower on each side. They do it by alliance because they're trying to teach collaborative teamwork. So not only are you in a team with some engineering mentors and your teachers and your classmates to build a robot, you have 6 weeks to do it, you get a box of stuff, and then you go through the regionals. But when you get to the competition, you're going to be assigned 2 other teams that you've never met before, and the 3 of you are an alliance against 3 other high school teams. And so the red alliance, the blue alliance, and it mixes and matches up. They have a Curie field, a Galileo field, an Archimedes field, I forget the last, a Newton field, and then they all compete, and the winners go to Einstein field. And so it was the winners were 2 teams from Toronto and 1 from Texas. Fabulous alliance. It's astonishing to watch a robot designed by high school kids with their mentors be as far as I am, flinging frisbees all the way through like a tiny slot in the door and hitting it every single time with the winning teams, and then running around, and at the end they have to climb the tower. And so some teams actually, depending on how you were, one team went straight up, some people just hung on the edge, but all 3 robots in each case, all 6 were hanging and up high by the end of the competition. Just fabulous. And you think, kids, you think about your kids, you're like, how did they do that? But I met so many kids, it was their first time to ever do the competition. They were on fire. They're so passionate. And they learned all this stuff. It's just, so this gamification, whether it's in the way, I think game in the most broadest sense, fun to do. Project-based learning, we've learned that project-based learning is actually more effective based on test scores than non-project-based learning. And then, in fact, it's cheaper. So we have to figure out around this, how do we scale this stuff to all our children? Right now, these things like First Robotics and all the cool clubs are meeting about maybe 4 or 5 million of our kids are able to play in those. There's 60 million kids in the US. How are we going to get all of them to have a First Robotics-like experience, in their classroom during the day with their teachers, so they're really engaged and innovating with us?
Well, the other part, just to add, the other part of the gamification challenge as they discussed it was not just having an activity that was supportive and very different and would ignite them, but to use this as a way to integrate into the current curriculum so that they were on fire all day long.
Right.
Couldn't wait to get there, and that this was really highly integrated. And, and again, the opportunity to, I had, interesting is my children are grown folks now, but when they were small, it's very interesting how our learning system compresses their thinking and depresses their enthusiasm. And we know that gaming, to your point, for everyone, and now is a keen opportunity for us to fully integrate into the curriculum and to get everybody on fire all day long.
Yeah.
So, whether it's in your own company, your own research, your own institution, how do you gamify your problems so that your employees, your community love helping you solve it, right? That's a mechanism that's now enabled by the massive network effects that we have. And effectively, that's what Xprize is, right? When we set a very clear, measurable, objective goal, and we ask innovators around the world with ridiculous constraints, right? Ridiculous constraints that cause them to let go of their preconceived notions. When you constrain a person so much that they can't do it by throwing money or people at it, and they have to actually start thinking in a new fashion, that's what drives breakthroughs. And that's effectively what we're doing. Next, please. Happy App. This was actually along the notion of, actually, I was thinking the mood ring. Was anybody on this Happy App team? Somebody just read what it says. Develop an app-based system that will reduce severity of depression by at least 85%. In a population of 10,000 people. So this was actually focused on, we had a lot of the top 10 prizes came out of the happiness session very unexpectedly for us. And this was around the notion that depression is an epidemic and that right now it's pharmaceutically addressed. And the question is, can you in fact give people, teach people, gamify it, give them apps, give them mechanisms that can allow them to change their own behavior. And it's, effectively apps that might snap them out of it where they are. I don't know if you want to add anything else, guys, to this one.
Looks interesting.
Next, please. SafeX. So this was effectively your tunnel of truth, right?
This was in my sweet spot.
Yeah. So you want to talk about, we've talked about, we had also Dr. Tara O'Toole, who is the Undersecretary of Homeland Security, attending our event. She works, or you work with her?
Yep, she's my boss.
She's your boss. And we've been talking about doing some Homeland Security Xprizes. Right. The only thing that keeps me sane when I go through TSA is the notion that if I can disrupt them, I would feel really good about that.
And I'm sure that's a common thought by many people.
Yeah.
So I mean, this was a really interesting Xprize from our perspective of how do you make that TSA experience more palatable to people. And the idea really was that tunnel of truth. They want to do a 2 times improvement in accuracy, 50 to 75% improvement in cost efficiency, 10 times faster. And so these are obviously things that from a Homeland Security perspective, I'm sure it resonates with all of you, the traveling public. The good news is that from my perspective, this is one case where we're actually ahead of the Xprize. Woohoo! And I think within 3 years, I honestly believe with we have prototype panels in place, we're probably going to see around a 5-time improvement in accuracy and probably about a cost drop of around, it'll be about 80% cheaper. And so, but it's really interesting to hear other people's perspective on the security challenges and recognizes to me that we need to do a better job, I think, of maybe harnessing some of the innovators out there and let them know what are the true challenges that we face in terms of the cost. And it's interesting, when you look at technologies for deployment in the Homeland Security space, the challenge isn't necessarily maybe the fundamental technologies. I think we can, you can throw a stone around here and hit people that have, groundbreaking things. It's how do I turn that into an actual capability in the field? Working with government is hard. Anyone that's ever done it can recognize that. And so who has the stick-to-itiveness to work with government, to follow that through procurement, through transition, through deployment, through training guys who don't make a lot of money. Your transportation security officers don't make a lot of money, but they're the last line of defense between you and someone getting on that plane that could take it down. And so how do I develop capabilities that they can integrate that don't put them in really difficult positions of asking them to make a judgment call? And that's when we run into problems. When you're asking some guy who has no backing from up top, if he makes the wrong judgment call, he gets thrown in jail or excoriated. If he makes the right judgment call, he has to do that every time. And so how can we have technology help them and make those judgment calls? So it was interesting to hear this pitch from me, and I would just ask you, next time when you're in line, try and be patient with those TSOs. They're there to protect you, and they're trying to do the best they can.
Thank you. Ripe for disruption. Okay. The prize that won the competition sort of hands down and then was actually taken off the table and the other 9 competed was this one, X2, Mother of All Xprizes. And you were not on this team?
I was not.
Okay.
It was Lynn.
Okay, it was Lynn, I know. But so Lynn Tilton, Lynn is an amazing woman. She's one of our benefactors. She is the chairman or CEO of 75 different companies. She employs something between 120 to 250,000 people. She's about all U.S. manufacturing, and she goes and actually buys failing companies and help save them. And she's all over the place, from making helicopters to pharmaceuticals to cosmetics, all kinds of things. Amazing woman who basically believes, and I agree, that we do not hire enough women into organizations, and women basically don't make it into the senior levels, into the engineering, into the C-suite. And so what she effectively did was offer up a $5 million of prize money that the Xprize will actually have for teams that that have at least 50% women in their competing teams, a winning team that's at least 50% women or has a women CEO. So we're basically going to incentivize having teams bring more women into their organization and create models for what extraordinary companies can do. Really great, and she actually stood up on stage and said, I'm in this, I'm funding it, this is done. So we're going to figure out what that really means and announce it appropriately. But I'll turn to the women here. What's your experience in this area, and what would you like to add?
Well, it's really exciting, and it speaks exactly to what Megan said earlier about matching kind of purpose and points, which I'm going to steal that phrase from now on. I really do like that. In the prize competitions, if you look historically, women have not been as active participants. Whether they're self-selected or whether or not something else selects them is probably irrelevant. But the belief is that this is really going to amplify the participation, and that we'll see the positive results of that in the same way that we did in the robotics competition.
Yeah, a couple things. A couple Googlers have been doing some literature audits of sort of the data on diversity. One of the things that we've been looking at, for example, there's a McKinsey study, there's a Catalyst study about underrepresented minorities in leadership. McKinsey study is showing that, I think they looked at 250 companies in Europe. And they looked at a bunch of different attributes, but one was how gender diverse was their leadership team. And they found that for any of the companies that had gender diverse leadership teams, they were measurably better in financial performance, and that they had 3 attributes in common. One was that the leadership talked about it, and it was like part of the topics and something they cared about. Second was that they had actual measurement at all levels and programs. So trying to work on advancement because of bias in our systems. And the third was just a conversation, an innovation conversation about bias that exists and what challenges people have had, and that they had made great progress. There's another study that's called Rule of 3, which is if you have 3 or more women on a board, you have better financial performance. So that's pretty interesting. I think that's probably because boards are, often about 10 or 12 people, and maybe a little more, but you're getting to like a third and you're having a conversation versus being the only representative there. So I think this is incredibly interesting because ideas come from everywhere. We have an initiative at Google that's called the Diverse Minds that Sergey and I work on to just try to bring more talent. Another thing that's interesting on here is you see the heroic examples. I think the technical women are pretty much invisible historically and currently. Small numbers are known, but it tends to be anecdotal. For example, in our field of computer science, most people don't know that women are some of the founders of computer science. Ada Lovelace in the 1840s was the first person to ever write about the idea of programming something. Most people don't know about her. They know about Charles Babbage. Part of it is because we had an obsession with the machine, and so we forgot the operator, which is really the computer scientist. Or the ENIAC programmers, the first 6 digital programmers in our country are women. Nobody knows their story. So, doing things that will show not only historic work, but also current work of who's there, I think will be important for having men and women have heroes who are men and women, which will be great. So, critically important. I also think that the bias that we've faced, just historic bias. I had a wonderful conversation with an MIT alum who's ahead of me at dinner, who's here, and she told me that when she was in school and for physics, wanting to do physics as a freshman, the dean said that she was not allowed to study physics. This isn't that long ago. She had to study chemistry, which she hated. And so she transferred to MIT, so we were lucky to get her from that school. But when she arrived at MIT, they had made a mistake. And I feel badly to be associated with MIT for this example. They had made a mistake because of her name. They thought she was a man, and that the scholars that she had been offered would not be available to her anymore because she was just going to get married. Now, yes, she did get married, and yes, she raised 4 children. But she also is one of our leading scientists, works on the Voyager mission, worked on so many missions, is the first American to be invited to put an experiment onto a Russian rocket, and in fact, I think the State Department didn't let her do that, but a very decorated scientist who advises our country now. But those stories, her story is amazing, and it's not unique. And so we need people to know that it's not that long ago that, the race director of the Boston Marathon tried to rip the numbers off a woman who had entered in 1971 in the 100 photos that changed the world in the 20th century. So that's the 70s, not that long ago. So that we are really overcoming a lot to get here and see the only way to do this is this kind of leadership where you just jam it and you incent it.
It's literally you get what you incentivize, and what happened, one of the things that I think fundamentally you all get is that a bold, big demonstration of something happening changes people's mindset. And then we live in a new era, right? So Lindbergh flying across the Atlantic in 1927 in his rickety Spirit of St. Louis aircraft literally was a 30-fold increase in the market share within the next 18 months because that flight demonstrated it was possible, right? The breaking the 4-minute mile had that. So when you have a bold demonstration, you see people doing something, that's a way of sort of very rapidly changing cognitive beliefs, which otherwise is a really long, arduous process to take care of. Do we have anything else after this? Or is that the last slide? No. Oh, we have Moderating. Very briefly, this was, can you create a device that actually accurately measures a person's happiness level? Because if you can't measure it, you can't affect it. So again, one of the other 3 prizes in that area, which I actually think is a very good function.
Actually, this one was really, I think, somewhat inspired, which was the notion that we talked in a former prize about in teaching happiness. Yeah. And what the data shows us is for a fact, most people don't even know when they're happy. So we're in pursuit of it, but we can't define it. You know, we don't even know it when we see it, so we can't say that anymore. And so this actually suggested that we put frank measurement on it so that, that people could actually then make decisions around when they were happy so that they could pursue careers, opportunities. I really did, I know it seems odd that you don't know that you've enjoyed something and that you're not happy as a result of it, but this, you know, the data suggests that that is not the case and that there's an opportunity to begin to measure some of the unmeasurables, like happiness, and then to allow people to do something active about it. So I thought this was interesting, and measurement was a theme.
Yes.
We talked about Alzheimer's, which is fascinating. 100 years ago, the way that you, for sure, determined the diagnosis of Alzheimer's was at autopsy. Now, 100 years later, the for sure way to determine that someone has Alzheimer's is actually still at autopsy. So that there are all of these proxies that we're beginning to accept, you know, biomarkers and bioimaging and other things, but at the end of the day, we're not 100% sure until we've actually seen an affected brain. And so there are opportunities for us to really get better measurements across almost all of the things that we've anticipated prizing. So I thought this one was inspired because it was really focused on measurement.
Thank you. Is there another slide? Okay. Let me just very quickly mention the other Xprizes in development in the pipeline right now. We're working on an earthquake prediction Xprize. Can you predict an earthquake 30 minutes, an hour, a day earlier, whatever it is? There's lots of data out there. Working on one of our goals. These are partially funded or unfunded, but they're in our pipeline. A organogenesis Xprize, go from a skin cell to a transplantable heart, liver, lung, or kidney. The Roddenberry Foundation underwriting us, something I would love to do, especially with the 405, we call the Roddenberry Transporter Xprize. It would effectively be, you know, the bringing together of AI, lightweight, strong materials, and high energy density batteries for electric transporters, vertical takeoff, and, you know, sort of Santa Monica to LA in 10 minutes instead of on the 10 and the 405. But imagine for use in the developing world where there are no roads, all right? Let's see, what else is on the docket right now, guys? Ocean Health. We're launching. Wendy Schmidt's funding an Ocean Health Xprize for being able to measure actually acidification accurately in the ocean depths and coastlines. Understand what that you cannot do today, which is amazing. We're looking at an image diagnostic for looking at using AI to do retinal diagnostics very quickly, or any kind of digital image, medical image diagnostics, whether mammograms, whatever the case might be. Because taking images is now cheap. The expensive part is having a radiologist look at it. I call this the Replace the Radiologist Xprize. Sorry for the radiologist.
I'm going to help you rename that.
Yes, I know.
Upgrade the radiologist.
Anything else that...
There's
Prize.
you just came from
Well,
Mojave,
those are-
so maybe talking about the Ansari and sort
Yeah,
of
well,
where
I could talk about the
Lunar.
actually active prizes. So I was just yesterday, flew in at midnight. I was at the Spaceship Two first powered flight. So our very first X Prize was for private space flight, right? Build a spaceship and carry 3 adults up into space, land safely, do it again within 2 weeks. Everybody laughed, crazy idea, Boeing and Lockheed. In fact, someone sold me a hole-in-one insurance policy, which I purchased because the insurance company believed it was not winnable. And that's how the actual $10 million got funded at the end of the day. Long story, but the odds were so far against it because the principal companies weren't going to compete. It was won in 2004. Richard Branson came in and bought the rights to commercialize it. Long process, but yesterday, Spaceship Two, the follow-on vehicle, did its first flight at a 16-second engine firing at altitude from 50,000 feet, broke Mach 1, going up to about 70,000 feet, came down. It was the critical linchpin of the entire program. From here, we'll get very quickly to space, and we'll have, hopefully, flights fulfilling whatever 1,000 seats that have been purchased. So we'll create more private astronauts in the first year than in the last 50 years of spaceflight. The follow-on to that is the Google Lunar Xprize. Megan is one of the members helping to manage and run that. Sergey and Larry actually greenlit it years ago. And it's $30 million for for the first team to build a robot, land on the surface of the moon, rove a half a kilometer, send back photos and videos before and after they rove. We have about 24 teams in 20 countries around the world competing for that. We've got the Qualcomm Tricorder Xprize, build a handheld mobile device that you can talk to, cough on, do a finger blood prick, and diagnose you better than a team of board-certified doctors. Announced that last year with Paul Jacobs. We have 287 teams from 33 countries that have entered that competition. A sister competition has Nokia Sensing Competition, $2.25 million from Nokia for biometric sensors. New generation of sensors, whether they're contact lenses or looking at your gait or whatever it might be, those sensors will flow into the Qualcomm Tricorder. We have 2 battery Xprizes under development. Thank you. We haven't discussed these publicly a lot yet, but I guess we can mention we'll be rolling. These are under design right now. Florida Power and Light and Larry Page are both underwriting. But it's can we drive breakthroughs for batteries for electric vehicles and eventually for flying vehicles as well. Very, very critical
One of my
prizes.
favorite ones that was won is the Wendy Schmidt Ocean Cleanup,
Yeah.
which just speaks back to sort of the ideas come from everywhere. And the team that won was from Vegas.
One of the teams that made it to the finals was a team that had never in the oil cleanup business. They heard about it. They met in a Las Vegas tattoo parlor. The tattoo artist was the designer. One of his customers funded it. They built a scale model of this contraption to clean up oil in the guy's jacuzzi. And the first time it doubled what had been the industry rates for the last 20 years. Let me open up for questions from the audience here. We have 15 minutes left. Questions about innovation, Xprize, any of the amazing work that these people do.
Can I ask the first question? Because I think there's something that that was very important to me around the Xprize that you didn't really touch on, and that is I come from a highly regulated environment, as many people in the room do. So whether or not you're in finance or in your life sciences research and development or whatever it is you're in, many of the industries that seek innovation are regulated. And one of the first questions that we ask is, oh, okay, so how do you handle the regulators? And I think you had some wonderful success stories in this space that I think would be tantalizing for people who, kind of see the regulatory environment as a potential a barrier to this innovation.
Really, really important. And there are 2 parts to the answer, right? The first is our competitions are global. So technology you develop may actually deploy in Africa first before the U.S. Possibility. Second thing is by creating these very global, visible competitions that could potentially be illegal in the U.S. because the regulations aren't there, actually force the regulators to change the rules. And so with the Ansari Xprize for spaceflight, Marion Blakey, an amazing woman who was then the FAA administrator, I walk into Marion's office and say, Marion, we got 26 teams from 7 countries spending $100 million, and it's illegal for them to fly people into space here in the U.S. In her Texas accent, she goes, well, we'll just have to change that, won't we? And she did. And the rules that are now available for private spaceflight, with the Qualcomm Tricorder Xprize working with the FDA, with Peggy Hamburg there, we're very closely working with them to drive breakthroughs in how handheld mobile consumer devices could become your medical physician. So we're working very closely with FDA. So these competitions actually, a lot of times people in the political world who want to cause change, this is a convenient excuse for them to cause change.
Well, and I'll jump on that from the government side. We see, I think with the budget pressures we're under, I think there is a lot more acceptance for changing the way the government does its business. There's 2 specific examples that I can give. One is tactical UAVs, unmanned air vehicles, hugely used overseas, and you can see now the FAA is actually opening up airspace for these small UAVs, and it's something that they said they'd never do, but they're now being forced to look at that because of the promise of those technologies. And the other one that's closer to home, I talked about that superconducting cable and how we connect electrical substations. Well, that deals directly with energy regulations. And so, we're partnering with, we're planning hopefully a fairly large project with the utility, and they had to go forward with the FERC on whether it was determined a transmission or a distribution. And it has huge impact for those in the utility business on how it's classified in terms of funding and resources available. But I will say that the regulators are open to that conversation. So, I think in the past it might have been a much more closed view. We see that with biodiagnostics, one test from many. You know, FDA likes one test for one thing, and then, but we see this the technology advancing towards, you know, a pan diagnostics approach. So those, if you do have innovative ideas, what I would recommend to you is what you may have heard in the past for regulators probably isn't the case anymore. Now, it's really helpful to have something like the Xprize that can kind of like, you know, hey, there's a public push for it. But if you've got a great technology that can solve a need, I think government is more open than ever before to hearing about that and changing how we do business.
We have a microphone over here, and then Esther Dyson next.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very excited about the mother of all prizes. But of all the prizes you described, it was the least defined. So I'm not quite sure, in taking that away, what you would see. We're not talking technology here. You're talking about revolutionizing women's impact and presence and reach. But how can you just give us a little better sense? Because it's so important, but it really is the most ambiguous.
If you put that one, yeah.
I'll just say again, you change what, and if you give it to Esther over there as now, you incentivize the change you want to occur, and then we're trying to have Xprizes be large-scale events that change public behavior. Where this is a behavioral modification prize, effectively, right? It's changing entrepreneurial organizations to say, yes, we should. There's a completely, massively amazing part of the population we are not tapping into. And if all of a sudden Xprizes are being won by, and the people winning them are on stage getting the money, and by women and women teams and so forth, you're going to start to see the world differently. And that's what we're trying to do, is get people to see the world differently. I mean, you guys want to add to that?
So it's inclusion, right? So one of the roles is to have women in your team at an equal level. Another is if your leader is a woman. So I think that's the direction I'm going to, is like, how are we going to push for actual inclusion, you know, in the conversation together? So we're collaborating together.
So could that be a prize that's won with another prize?
Yes,
that's
it would be a layer on top of.
It's a turbocharge
so it's
to
not
include women into the project.
And speaking about amazing women, we have Esther Dyson here.
Hey.
Thank you. Sorry to lower expectations. I wanted to do a shout out and a question. Down the hall, the global entry people are signing people up, and that's loosely connected, I'm not sure how, to the pre-check program, which is probably the most popular government program. How did that happen? That was the first question. The second question for Peter was, any prizes even considered around the kind of financing innovation you showed with that fabled insurance policy, probably more on the side of long-term derivatives to fund education or medical, preventive health cost up front, huge return down the way. Maybe just a study showing that impact. Anyway, sorry.
So global entry is a way for you to actually bypass your customs interview and come into the country much quicker. If any of you travel internationally on a regular basis, highly recommend you sign up for global entry. It's $100 for 5 years. And then it also gains you access to TSA's pre-check, which for those of you who are like Platinum Premier or other on United, you get pre-check for United, but if you switch carriers, you don't get pre-check. But with global entry, you get pre-check across all airlines. So there's my bid for that. And so the reason that came about, pre-check came about, was because we wanted to move towards risk-based screening. We see a massive growth, or not massive, but a significant growth in year over year of the flying public, domestic, international. We're not getting any more money for screeners. So how do we separate, you know, there's the needle in the haystack of those people that want to do bad things. How do I make the haystack smaller to try and identify the needle? So those people that are low risk, how do we pull them out? And that was what pre-check was meant to do. It's really to make us more efficient. But it's a challenge because you look at the knives policy, the small knife policy. I bet you go in this room, half people think, oh, it's crazy they're going to allow knives on the planes. The other half are like, why are they even searching for these knives? It's stupid. And so it's a really difficult, TSA has to walk that line of making sure they do a good job of trying to mitigate risk without getting down to zero risk and expedite air travel and increase economic flow.
The answer is no, I haven't, and we'll talk about it. Next question. With the mic.
But can I make one quick comment about the financial? I was on the aging group. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but that's where I was. And so we were really talking about one of the biggest challenges in the United States and everywhere around the world for supporting aging in its current state is financial. And we actually had at the very beginning of our discussions a category that said financial. And frankly, we fell flat on figuring out how we would discuss that, how we would, kind of pull the discussion up and how we would prize that. So there was really some enthusiasm around trying to solve financial challenges that are attached to things like aging, obesity, Alzheimer's, and other things. And we, the group in the room just kind of sat there saying, no, we knew we needed to get that done. So maybe when you follow up and answer that question, there's an opportunity to talk about how we might begin to look at that.
We have a microphone there. Let me just say one thing. Xprize is also working on, we're getting ready to roll out this summer a platform called Fix, which is going to be a platform that allows us to design and launch fund prizes at a very large scale that are more local in their focus. We have a microphone over there, sir.
It seems that the Xprize focuses on technological innovation and change to accomplish new things. And in the medical field, I've found that that technological revolutions in that are phenomenal in diagnosing diseases, but they're also extremely expensive. And whether it's the government paying for medical care or the private sector, it's crippling our economy. And so I'm wondering if the Xprize has taken a look at that in a way of trying to make technological innovation that's less expensive. But if we add new devices into the medical world, in fact, it causes more money to be spent towards those and exacerbates a problem.
Because we're almost out of time and I want to take one more question, I'll just answer very quickly. The way to get prices down is to make things large scale, consumer, get them out of the specialty shop. The Tricorder, for example, is not for a doctor or nurse, it's for the consumer. And hopefully, if you have billions of these in Africa, they'll be as expensive as that massively expensive cell phone that someone microfinances as well. So that's the end goal. We have one more last question here up in front, and then I think we need to break.
Thank you all. My question's for Paul. So first of all, I think it's great that there's somebody doing what you do. I think as consumers and as just American citizens, it's great that there are people working on innovations. So my question for you is, we talked kind of generally about the goals in what you do and sort of some of the prices. What are some of the specific technologies, if you can talk about it, that have either been developed for TSA or maybe in the wake of Boston, some of the technologies that have been developed in the recent years that helped sort of advance and progress the way that investigation did?
Sure. So I'll give one example that I think is kind of the heart of what we're trying to do of leveraging the private sector. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of InQtel. It's the CIA started kind of a venture firm that's kind of morphed. It's not really a venture firm now. But basically all the intel agencies, from Defense Intelligence to CIA to NSA, actually get together and they look at new venture firms that are starting up in Silicon Valley and other places and whether they have applicable on the security side. And one of the ones that came to us was a tunable IR laser that's used for medical both diagnostics and incising. So they wanted to actually have a laser that could hit a spot, tell what's actually in there using the laser spectroscopy, and then actually change the wavelength and power of the laser to actually excise the cut. And so they wanted to have this in one point. Well, and so that's a really complicated problem, but it's got a commercial market. But you could look at that tunable laser, and actually I could use different wavelengths actually can give me better spectroscopy for explosives detection. And if I can make that eye safe, and if I can tune across multiple level lasers, I can look for high explosives, I can look for homemade explosives. And so leveraging that innovation that occurred for specific medical technology, we're funding with several other intelligence agencies to try and bring it across to explosives detection. And so those are the kind of things that, from the government perspective, these budgetary constraints, in some ways it's a good thing, are forcing us to leverage those high-risk investments that are made in other industries, bring them around to the security side, but at the same time have a commercial market going forward. And so there's a couple other things like that, but I think that's probably a good one that illustrates the point.
Wonderful. I want to introduce Laura Mueller and Jordan Katz from the Xprize in the corner here if you have any questions for either of them, and Josh Cohen, who's with our group at Fix, and Kian Gohar, who runs the Innovation Partners Program. Thank you all. Have a great day. Thank you to my panelists.